All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, we're looking ahead of the forthcoming off-cycle elections in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi states. As you've seen, Ezeman Wagu joins us next. He is the chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Wow, one wonders. So how are the partners gearing up for this off-cycle elections?
Well, you know, this is going to be one other big hurdle for us in terms of how we deepen our electoral process. Some of those continuous lessons we need to be drawing. Those three states are going to be challenging.
Why so?
History. Their history in terms of conduct of the stakeholders, especially the politicians in those three states, gives nightmare not just to those of us who are observing the elections. The independent the electoral management body, the security agencies are at Teta's hook, if you like, at this point. And the reason is not far-fetched. Bayelsa, the control of politics there has largely been by some other forces other than just the voters, the role of the militants and all of that. In Imo, the activities of the known, unknown gunmen and the pervading insecurity in that state is a huge issue. And then, of course, you know that if you saw what happened in Kogi in the last governorship election, and indeed, even in 2023, you see that there has to be much more work, really, for those three. And it's, unfortunately, they are all court-ordered elections, and they have to be happening same day, 11/11.
What about preparations by INEC? Does it infuse any confidence?
I think oftentimes sometimes I make this argument, and I don't like to continue to do that, but it's helpful to understand that INEC will prepare for elections. All the buckets are being filled in terms of what needs to happen. You know, stakeholder engagements to ensure that people collect their PVCs, deployment of materials. All of that happens, you know, nearly hitch-free until the E-Day, you know, the election day proper, where opening of polls can be affected by logistics. Punctuality index can also be affected by logistics. That is, especially now when you look at the canopy under which this particular election is happening, where the vendors, the transport vendors for INEC at the national level are embroiled in crisis. The NURTW, for instance, who are, for some reasons, are the ones INEC continues to engage to move materials, election materials from one point to another. Yeah. Now, those ones are embroiled in crisis. How that affects the subnational chapters of those unions is something that INEC needs to work very hard on to ensure, because in good times, they renege on MOUs. So now that they have, you know, crisis at the top level, I don't know how that will impact.
You know, part of why I asked, because I thought that time and again, this key component, that part always is a challenge, most times. And I thought that when INEC meets with political parties, civil groups, they raise these things, and then they could even suggest, because they keep insisting on using this larger body because they say they're the largest one. So must we continue that way? Can there be some
Well, there's been a lot of, you know, conversations around alternative transport provisioning. But I've heard INEC say they tested some of these alternatives, for instance, in Anambra State. You know, when we had the last civil society engagement, these questions came up. And the INEC chairman said, look, we did meet the transport companies. They promised that they had, you know, the capacity to deal with these issues. And then on the E-Day, they just tell you that they are trying to source vehicles from other people and those things didn't work. And then we are not ready for those excuses. So, but NURTW may not, they have their people. So what needs to happen is to be able to enforce those MOUs and sanction where there is a, what do you call it, infraction. But that doesn't seem to, why that doesn't happen is what I've always wondered about. Why, for instance, you pay somebody 50% of mobilization, and then on the ED, the person says is not coming. And then nothing is done.
Or is a racket going on somewhere?
Yes, somehow there are issues, of course. Those are also challenges. But the thinking around logistics needs to continue in terms of what needs to be done to crack that very number.
What would you suggest? I mean, you've been there for a
I've
while.
talked about, we are thinking of, bigger logistic companies that are everywhere. But you also know the issue of fear in business. What happens to my vehicle is election. It's not something that we have not come to that point where people go just vote and go away. There are the place of talks, the place of...
Well, you can factor it into the negotiation. Insurance companies, those things can be worked out.
No, but Chamberlain, you live here. you live here. You are not from the moon. If insurance companies will not pay you when your vehicles are damaged immediately, you are out of business. Well, most of these businesses are not. I'm just saying that fear.
If it's comprehensive, I think
that fear is. See, we trust foreign insurance companies. You know why? Many of those foreign insurance companies are the ones we trust because we know that when we get into them. I think that's not a discussion for here. But what for me is important.
I hope NICOM is listening so they can do something about this.
What for me, that's why you can't have foreign banks don't thrive so much here. The reason they don't thrive here is because people trust their money with somebody they know, they can see. But they trust their life with somebody where there's a guarantee that if something happens to them. So you find that banks thrive, our indigenous banks thrive, but insurance companies don't do so well because of some of these variables. The same reason why, for instance, Ford will not sell very well in America, and then Innocent will be struggling here. The Japanese, will sell their vehicles there. Their own people may not naturally be importing cars from other places. So the big challenge for me really has to do with much more engagement with these transport providers in a way that guarantees that they will do what they have said they will do. And when they don't do, there is sanctions in terms of whether it's legal, whether it's sanctioned not to use those particular ones other times. But there's an expansion. And remember that the Kogi, the 3 states have riverine components in the planning. So you are engaging maritime unions, you are dealing with the Navy, Air Force, gunboats.
It's just 3 states. So if they normally tell us, I think police will tell you they deploy 5,000 police officers, then NSCDC will equally deploy. So if a combination,
who counts?
30.
Who counts those numbers? See, the political economy of those security deployment is itself a challenge. So as people who move around, you see more policemen at the INEC. If you go to Kogi, for instance, you are likely going to see more policemen at the INEC state headquarters than you are going to see in Dekina or in Olamaburu. So because they told us 40,000 of them will be in Imo, for instance. So when you go to Owerri INEC, you see policemen everywhere. But as you move down to Olu, you move to Mbise, you move to Okigwe, you move to Ngopala, the numbers starts distilling. And lack of coordination, territorialism, where because of the political economy that I've talked about, everybody wants to be on their own. The Intelligence Consultative Committee on Election...
How? Security agencies?
Security-wise, this NSGC that you are talking about, coordination in terms of number, in terms of the work. So the Intelligence Consultative Election Security, that should be that platform of coordination. In the field, everybody is on their own. You see NSDC trying to do their own thing. And it all has to
even though they meet together in INEC office.
They meet at the Intelligence Consultative Committee on Election Security. They put out these numbers. But as we speak, and having done this for a long time, that is where attention is not being paid. Because mobilization for those officers most times are at the state headquarters. You see the numbers at the state headquarters. But the real places where they are needed is in the backwater communities, in the hinterlands, where you actually need effective policing of, the electoral process. So because when you see that number at this age, you say, oh, they deployed 40,000 people. But we know that the challenges has had more to do with lack of, coordination and the territorialism that goes with it.
I've been listening to you, and I don't know whether to be depressed or encouraged. Listening to
how much we spend every year,
every
4 years for elections,
and whether or not we really understand, what democracy is about, whether we understand the place of elections in our democracy and the role that it plays, or whether it is the desperation of our politicians that, continues to fuel the level of violence that we see or we anticipate in elections. Because as you've said, you say even observers have nightmares. If observers who have a choice as to where they want to go and observe the elections, whether they even just want to stay in the capital, will have nightmares, how much more those who must deploy, because elections must take place to the smallest ward, to the smallest polling unit, and it must be substantially complied with. So I'm just wondering, how would you say, how would you, rate the chances of us being able to conduct free, fair, and credible elections in these 3 states, given the challenges which you've already enumerated? This is minus the fact that we're coming from an election that people are going to say, oh, the confidence of the people have dipped somewhat, and they might not be as active, they might not be as enthusiastic as they normally ought to be for even elections that are closer to them. What are the chances that we'll be able to achieve, conclusive elections this time around?
You see, the governorship elections are the most contested. Really, that's what the experience has. That's where the theater of, engagement, that's where it happens. So, free, fair, credible election. Oftentimes, when we hold that conversation, if you also listen to Chamberlain, the first point is always, what will INEC do? And my argument is that we give comfort to the folks who contribute much more to whether you have credible, fair, acceptable, conclusive, inclusive election. And that is the politicians. They are candidates. Their rule affects the quality of election. And because we over-respect them, we don't always have... So I'm excited when this kind of conversations come to put their leg on the fire. That if the politicians decide to behave well, INEC would get core members, get ad hoc staff.
We should equally put pressure on the police.
I'm coming now. I'm building something.
Okay. You're a good architect.
Yes, I'm building. I'm just telling you that if you watch, flagship programs like the one we are in now, 90% of the conversation is in what INEC will do, what INEC will do, what INEC will do. And sometimes the real guys, they are excited, they are happy. And they are like, wow, what will INEC do? INEC does not have thugs. INEC does not do voter suppression. INEC does not influence the security agencies not to mobilize security to where it is needed. So these people need to play their role. And if they play their role, then we will be a card-carrying member of a political party. And we have already petitioned. It's not that we are going to petition. We have petitioned again that this kind of, when you are struggling very hard to improve the electoral process, the human resource component needs to go side by side with that.
Because there's a picture of him in APC attire.
It's very clear. It's not AI. It's not AI. It's a photo of him.
There's a video as well.
Recently, that's what I'm saying. It's not AI. So you appoint somebody like that into a sacred institution where our leadership recruitment process is conducted. The optics that you put forward is that that institution should not be trusted, and it is the responsibility of that institution itself. Is the responsibility of that institution to even vanguard, you know, these things that they have outsourced to civil society. There are other folks. Okay. There is somebody who was, you know, sacked for misconduct from a particular university. He's back in another university. In that university, he's being investigated as we speak now. He made the list.
Why do we do this?
Who was this gentleman?
We'll say one Yalwa from University of Abuja. He was sacked from the
Professor Mohammed Yalwa, yes. Niger State Resident Electoral Commissioner.
Yes, he was removed from the IBB University. He found his way back to University of Abuja. As we speak now, he's undergoing some distance from his conduct. So these issues are there. When we raise those issues, they took us to court. Ask channels to bring the video of where we made those statements.
We'll have the video.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the former ones. We were petitioned. We went to the police to go and defend simple act. And you brought myself and the chair. You brought myself and the chair of the what do you call it? The Senate Committee on Electoral Matters to this place. And he said the reason they didn't look at our petition was because we did not swear to affidavit. And today he didn't make it back to the National Assembly.
Yeah, but I don't know whether we should be afraid, because I'm looking at this gentleman from Akwa Ibom State, and I also know that the current Senate president is from Akwa Ibom State, and oftentimes he wields the gavel.
No, in this particular case, he cannot wield that gavel. He holds that position in trust for the Nigerian people. It's a position he holds in trust for the Nigerian people to do and uphold the Constitution. So he cannot support the inclusion of somebody who is patently partisan into an institution that is called Independent National Electoral Commission.
What if he says, I've resigned, I'm no longer partisan? I used to be, I joined the APC so and so time.
Oh, he just wait the bloom some few days.
I'm no longer partisan. That was a long time ago. What happens?
The Constitution says people of unimpeachable character. So if you resigned, you are partisan. And this institution is not for people who have partisan inclinations. There are conflict of interest issues. It manifested in 2019 when we filled up those positions with people who had this kind of, and we saw it manifest in Adamawa. We saw it manifest in Imo.
Aren't those two separate issues?
They are not separate, they are together.
Being of impeachable character, are you saying everybody in political parties don't have good character? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying so. I'm saying that if you have challenges in terms of partisanship, you have already impugned your ability to work effectively in a way that will be acceptable to generality of Nigerians who see you and know you to be. So even when you do things that are, okay, they will immediately associate it with your past. That past will haunt every step that you take. And that's why there is a screening. That's why you have to go to this DSS. That's why you have to go to... Otherwise, we should just appoint people and they take office. The reason we pass them through screening is to be able to ensure that they fulfill not just the spirit and letter of the Constitution, but that even the optics. We want to create an INEC that people can have confidence in the human beings that work there, that they are able to discharge their duties without, fear of responsibility. But even if it's an ongoing thing, we hope that the National Assembly will do the right thing this time around, and we are counting on the relevant committees of the National Assembly to do their job. What we do is, as civil society, is to provide these materials and say, you look at it. At the end of the day, if you choose to, sometimes the challenge also is that the beneficiaries of some of these are the politicians, and oftentimes they are themselves the people who decide whether those people pass.
We'll look to see what kind of defense they will bring this time, because the script is always that I've resigned. I'm no longer this, I'm no longer that. But we'll have next questions.
Yeah, and the evidence.
Oh, the pictures are, yeah, the pictures are everywhere. So, and the video, in fact, as a matter of fact, for some of this, and the records as well are also there. So we'll look to see how that defense will come through. I want to thank you for coming on. Ezemamago is the chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay on with us.